Welcome everyone. Just wanted to see how many convicts are in the room, because there's one thing that's clear, is that if you are a convict, you are required now to return back to Great Britain, because we're about to create an Australian Republic. One of the great things about where Australia sits at the moment is we're no longer a convict colony, but we're a nation that's on the verge of greatness. We've moved away from ensuring people had prior convictions before coming to Australia and having a dominant Anglo culture to building the world's most successful, multicultural and immigrant society in the world. There is no country in the world compared to Australia that has a high percentage of immigrants that were born outside of Australia. America, supposedly the home of the Statue of Liberty and the melting pot of the world, has half that percentage. Foreign backpackers visit Australian cities, like Melbourne, only to witness people speaking over 260 languages, coming from over 200 countries, and believing in over 135 different faiths. In Melbourne, you can visit a German beer hall, a Hindu temple, or immerse yourself in Chinatown. Our cities and our nation embraces the rest of the world in such a profound way that we try to make sure everyone feels at home. Today I have the pleasure of making the case for a brand new democracy model for a future Australian Republic. The reason why the model is called a democracy model is because I believe democracy is humanity's finest achievement. Because democracy reflects the reality of human existence, that we're complex creatures and often impotent in the face of our own nature. Democracy historian Roger Osborne puts it best by saying, more than all the paintings and sculptures on earth, more than all the poems, plays and novels, more than every scientific and technological invention put together, democracy shows humanity at its most creative and innovative. Democracy is a continual collective enterprise that binds us together while allowing us to live individually. The principle of democracy should be at the heart and soul of a future Australian Republic. As Australia has a proud democratic history that includes the Eureka Rebellion in Ballarat in 1854, being the first nation to be created out of a democratic vote back in 1901, as previous countries have been formed out of war, conflict or martyrdom, being the first nation to allow women both the right to vote and running elections back in 1902, being one of only 10 countries around the world that embraces compulsory voting, and being the nation that conducts the world's largest online music democracy each year, with over 1 million people being involved in ABC's Triple J's Hottest 100. When Australia has such a proud democratic history, our nation should aim to be the world's best democracy in the 21st century when we transition to become an Australian Republic. In sport, our nation has recently won the Asian Cup and the Cricket World Cup. But when Norway is ranked the best democracy in the world and Iceland is ranked the best democratic republic in the world, it is vital that Australia plays the role of transitioning from being the 6th best democracy according to the Economist Intelligence Unit to becoming the world's best democracy in the 21st century. Setting new goals for our nation should be the essence of why Australia should become a republic in the 21st century. We should not just aim to be a fully independent nation and have an Australian head of state by becoming a republic, but set new democratic goals for our nation like being the world's best democracy in the 21st century, a goal that the Australian Labor Party can lead on and achieve in the coming years ahead. Another democratic goal our nation should set ourselves when transitioning to become a republic is to ensure our Indigenous people, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of some 670,000 people, become equal partners in any new Australian Republic. Indigenous Australians have a history spanning over 40,000 years, and we can no longer afford to deny the original inhabitants of our country an equal place in our nation and in our constitution. Fully recognising the rights of Indigenous Australians and Indigenous peoples around the world should be a major goal for Australia when transitioning to become a republic. A final democratic goal for Australia when becoming a republic is to fully embrace the globally interconnected world that we now live in, that is placing more power in the hands of the people thanks to the industrial and digital revolutions, and is creating a Republic Earth, a global society where all people around the world, by as early as 2025, could have the world's information in the palm of their hands via smartphones and greater power than ever before. I consider myself to be a Republic Earth idealist, who is really excited by the new globally interconnected world that is being created and will hopefully unite the world for the common good. New York Times journalist Thomas Friedman last year stated that the 21st century will be a century defined by order and disorder, and that over the last 15 years, we've unfortunately been moving into a growing world of disorder. The growing threats posed by this world of disorder include the threat posed by Islamic State in Iraq, Syria, Northern Africa and the Middle East, the instability in the Ukraine, the Ebola outbreak, the threat posed by the adverse impacts of climate change, growing inequality, that democracy is in decline in countries throughout the world, like in Russia and Turkey, and that the UN Refugee Agency just announced that the number of refugees, asylum seekers and internally displaced people worldwide has for the first time since the post-World War II era exceeded 50 million people. Friedman notes that in light of this growing world of disorder, the defining issue of the 21st century is how does the world and countries like Australia seek to preserve and expand the world of sustainable order in the 21st century. From my perspective, by becoming an Australian Republic and setting a new ambitious democratic goal for our nation, like creating a global democracy called Republic Earth, Australia has an opportunity of preserving and expanding the world of order in the 21st century to ensure all 7.3 billion people who speak over 6,000 languages are heard around the world. The concept of Republic Earth was coined by futurist and architect Buckminster Fuller, who envisaged a future world of immediate democracy, of people participating in multiple referendums by phone. This vision of global democracy is now within our reach. If Australia aims to become the world's best democracy in the future, Australia should also become an advocate for creating a global democracy, as without ensuring everyone's voice matters around the world, a growing world of disorder will continue. It's been interesting to follow events around the world such as the Occupy Wall Street protests, the Arab Spring, the Scottish referendum and new democratic programs like Podemos in Spain and Democracy OS in Argentina. But what all have in common is inherent frustrations that citizens do not have enough power and enough say in determining their political course in their nations. If we're going to preserve and expand the world of order in the 21st century, humanity needs to embrace this new world of Republic Earth, and nations like Australia need to be fully devoted to notions of democracy and the Republic. There are 167 democracies around the world and 135 nations are considered to be republics, so notions of democracy and the Republic are globally popular. However, there are only 13 fully fledged democratic republics in the world, and thus more work is needed to create a Republic Earth where all people are fully devoted to notions of democracy and republic to ensure they have the power they deserve. Former US President Franklin Roosevelt, who worked to create the United Nations, had a dream for the entire world and all people to enjoy 4 basic freedoms back in 1941. Freedom of speech, freedom to worship, freedom from want or ensuring a basic level of social security and building a worldwide middle class, and freedom from fear of aggression. In our new world of Republic Earth, it is possible for Australia to play a role in making this 4 freedoms dream and the dream of global democracy become a reality. If Great Britain gave us the Parliament and the United States is considered the oldest democracy in the world, Australia can create a global democracy in the 21st century. So what does this democracy model for an Australian Republic look like, and how do we fulfil our goals of not only becoming a fully independent nation with an Australian head of state, but also achieve new democratic goals of being the world's best democracy, making our Indigenous people equal partners in our nation, and starting the process of creating a global democracy in the 21st century. The democracy model would not seek to make wholesale changes to Australia's political system, but just reform the hierarchy of Australia's executive that currently includes 3 institutions: the Head of State, Queen Elizabeth II, our Governor-General, Peter Cosgrove, and our Prime Minister, Head of Government, Tony Abbott. The democracy model seeks to reform the hierarchy of Australia's executive by maintaining the institution of the Prime Minister as Head of Government and creating 2 new institutions that would replace Queen Elizabeth II as Head of State and Governor-General. The first new institution would be to create a President of Australia as Head of State that would be directly elected by the Australian people and would play a similar ceremonial role to our current Governor-General, but would also have an extra role of acting as the People's President by playing a role both domestically and internationally in advancing and defending the principle of democracy, humanity's finest achievement, and the principle of the Republic. The President of Australia would also be granted a new parliamentary role under a Republic of Australia. The President of Australia would be required to act as the People's President during each sitting week, whereby Australians would send questions to the President of Australia, who would then ask them in Parliament. During each sitting week, the President of Australia would be required to ask questions to any member of the House of Representatives on a Tuesday night from 6 till 6:30. This new Q&A feature will improve Australia's democracy and should be modelled on the concept created by Australia's Our Say organisation. Accordingly, the People's President will not be able to ask any personal questions, but will be required to only ask the most popular questions as voted for under Australia's Our Say system. The President of Australia would also have a role of promoting immediate democracy and promoting multiple national referendums via smartphones. This new Q&A feature and promotion of immediate democracy will make our democracy connect to the digital age and make our democracy one of the best in the world. The second new institution would be to create a brand new leader called the Head of the Indigenous People, or some other appropriate Indigenous name that is directly elected by the Australian people. This new Head of the Indigenous People, or leader, would have the role of advancing and protecting the interests of our Indigenous Australians and Indigenous peoples across the world. Since our colonial forebears reached our shores, the rich history of over 40,000 years of our Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders has been devalued and human rights have been infringed. While we made huge attempts as a nation to address our past wrongs and improve their standing in the community, it is vital that we create an institution that will defend their interests for as long as humanity continues to exist. The leader should play a role also in advancing the interests of over 370 million Indigenous people living in some 90 countries around the world. In doing so, this leader should work in partnership with the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues that advises on issues such as Indigenous economic and social development, culture, health and human rights. Moreover, where there is a lack of a global leader on Indigenous issues, it only seems natural for Australia to create a leader that defends their interests when we have one of the oldest continuous Indigenous peoples living in our country. Furthermore, as the world increasingly becomes interconnected, it is more important than ever before to protect our Indigenous cultures and languages from becoming extinct, in order to ensure the full richness of humanity is protected. Hence, creating both an Australian and global ambassador for all the Indigenous people will be of great value to the world, and Australians arguably would be extremely proud of Australia leading the way in the protection of Indigenous people. So this is the democracy model, a model that sets new democratic goals for our nation, but also creates a new Australian executive, a President of Australia as our new head of state, a brand new head of the Indigenous people, and maintains our Prime Minister as our head of government. A model that better reflects our national identity of being one nation, one people, one world, as reflected in my brother's flag design here. This democracy model provides a new hope for Australia, and I hope you will support this model for a future Australian Republic. Thank you.